This past spring, just, a couple months ago, a farmer in Canada was out checking his fields. Sounds like he had quite a bit of property in Canada. And he came across a strange thing, and it turned out it was part of a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. And Elon Musk wanted it back. Welcome to Truly Terrified, Paranormal versus Physics, where we talk about some really weird stuff, and Joe the scientist explains how it's not possible, or maybe it is. I'm Lynn, and
I'm Joe.
So this episode is not strictly speaking paranormal, although in my mind, there are some aspects of it which could be considered a little woo that I don't understand. So that piece of space junk in the guy's field fell out of the sky and landed there. It was part of a spacecraft that belonged to SpaceX, and it fell into this field. Space debris or space junk or orbital debris is any human-made object in orbit that's no longer useful, and sometimes it falls to the Earth.
Theoretically, it all falls to the Earth.
Eventually.
Any debris that's not on a collision course with some other object, or will make it out of the solar system, like has escape velocity, or it will leave the Earth's influence and it will stop orbiting Earth. All of it will eventually come back down. It will either hit the moon or it will hit the Earth.
Right. So this is not strictly paranormal, but it freaks me out. The thought that there's shit flying around up in orbit of the Earth that could just fall down. Now, so I looked up what exactly, what does it consist of? It's not like they're fast food wrappers, the astronauts' fast food wrappers or something. So it's derelict spacecraft, the actual crafts, and abandoned launch vehicle stages. So when they launch a vehicle, it comes off in pieces, and some of those pieces are still out there floating around the Earth, or not floating, zipping around the Earth. Fragments from disintegration of things like that, erosion, or even collisions, because there are collisions that occur.
Yeah.
Solidified liquids that are expelled from spacecraft. What would those solidified liquids be, you might ask? Human waste, as well as other things. But there you go. And spacecraft, you could also say that, although this is not strictly speaking space junk, because it's not in orbit, but those solidified liquids that are expelled from something in the sky can also be from jetliners.
Yeah.
Commercial airliners.
Because don't they, I don't know if they don't just dump it.
I don't know, but
I know that
stuff comes off.
Stuff can leak out,
yeah,
and crust as ice and then fall. The thing is, everything in orbit, Earth's orbit at least, is going really fast, really, really fast, like kilometers per second fast.
Yes,
very, very fast, and so fast that when it hits the atmosphere, it will be destroyed. Theoretically, some large pieces of debris might, parts of a piece might shield itself, or it might be made of materials that aren't destroyed by heat, for atmospheric heating. The vast majority of things that are in orbit, that deorbit, like space junk, are destroyed.
Okay, I understand that. But let me go on. In addition to those things I just mentioned, there are also unburned particles from solid rocket motors, and paint flecks, and retired satellites, and explosions of objects in orbit. So as of January 2022, there was more than 9,000 tons of space debris orbiting the Earth. That includes about 34,000 pieces that are larger than 4 inches in size, which seems extremely small unless you think of the velocity it would have to travel to come to Earth.
Going very fast. As a bolt going that fast could instantly annihilate you.
Yes, and there are millions more smaller pieces. So that's 34,000 pieces larger than 4 inches in size, and millions more that are smaller than 4 inches in size. While most objects do burn up completely when they enter the atmosphere, some pieces can survive and fall to the Earth, and they pose a risk to spacecraft like jet airliners or other things in the sky, you know, weather balloons, as well as people and property on the ground.
So one thing, in all honesty, the likelihood of any one piece falling like on your house or whatever is just really, really low. I mean, it has happened that buildings or people or whatever get hit by stuff from space, but it's so unlikely.
Yes, but that's where the paranormal aspect of this comes in. Why? What? The chances are so completely almost nil. I mean, the chances of being hit by one of the pieces of crap that falls out of orbit of the Earth and comes zooming down. First of all, when you consider how much space there is on Earth, how many pieces are actually coming down, whether or not it's going to survive re-entry into the Earth's orbit, you know, or burn up, and then to actually hit something, and yet it does.
So that is pretty much the crazy thing. It might just be like, you know, the chances of those sorts of things are actually higher than we intuit. Mm-hmm. But I think I've said this before. There does seem to be some really crazy coincidences. Like if I had to say, oh yeah, like point my finger at this is paranormal. Like this is an experience of mine that was paranormal. The insane coincidences would have to be the thing I point at, because some things just seem so unlikely.
Yeah.
However, one thing is, I think it's called the law of large numbers. There's like you do something enough times and an extremely rare event will happen. You just have to do it a lot. Yeah. So, you know, you do it 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion, 1 quadrillion times.
Eventually.
Or more. I just have to say how extremely unlikely it is that you actually get hit.
In 1997, a piece of a Delta II rocket's propellant tank, which sounds like it might be pretty big, hit an Oklahoma woman on the shoulder, but it didn't cause her any injury.
The piece was small? It was a small piece.
It had to have been small.
At that point, it was small.
It had to have been small.
So one thing that massively increases the chances of you being hit by something, it's still extraordinarily ultra unlikely. But what increases the chances of a lot is if the object breaks up into shrapnel. If it breaks up to such a degree that it's tiny, tiny pieces that spread out over a large area, that tremendously, I mean, you know, you're talking about going from one piece to like 1,000 pieces. That's a factor of 1,000. The area that it could hit is much larger, because it's spread out, you know. So that it's like, okay, if you had a spaceship that was 20 miles long, you know, and then that broke up, the pieces that hit the ground might be really big, maybe. But the parts that are already up there, once they break up, so in order to like increase the chance of them hitting you, they have to break up. But they're already not very big. So when they do hit you, they're very likely to be small. And because they're small, they're probably going pretty slow. Like, you know, it's like the thing where you drop a penny from the thing. Once it reaches terminal velocity, it's not really going that fast. It maybe could kill you, but probably not. And it's not like an anvil, you know. So if I drop an anvil from space, what will happen is it will mostly burn up, and then there will be slag that makes it down to the surface. That slag is tiny pieces.
Did you say an animal?
Anvil.
Oh.
An anvil.
That's why I was making this face, because I'm thinking,
yes,
why would you drop an animal?
Animal.
Okay, an anvil. Okay,
anvil. Yeah, animals turn into slag when you throw them super fast.
I was really repulsed.
That slag will have slowed down to terminal velocity for its size and shape, which is pretty slow. I mean, compared to a kilometer to whatever a second, however fast things going in low Earth orbit, it's going very much slower, like less than 100 miles an hour or whatever. I'm just guessing. So when that hits you, maybe if it's really, really sharp, probably not, because if it's slag, if it melted an animal,
it's probably smoothed off.
It's smoothed off like a teardrop shape. In fact, it's probably blunted. It's probably not going to kill you, probably. But that is probably like how I would imagine how it goes. Or, there's a piece of like temperature resistant tile.
Oh, yeah.
That's like, it makes it down because it's temperature resistant, and then it's like a flat piece of tile. I think they're like on the order of inches or less.
Yeah.
The tiles they use for re-entry vehicles and whatever. And those tiles maybe could hit you. I don't know. I just couldn't really see it.
Okay, in 2021, debris from a Chinese rocket landed in the Indian Ocean. Okay, that's like what you would want to happen, right? You would want it to land.
Yeah.
And probably the vast majority of the debris is landing.
The fact that most of the surface area of the planet is ocean.
But in April of 2022, a piece of debris from the International Space Station crashed through the roof of a Florida home.
Wow, so it would have to be going pretty fast. It'd have to be pretty big.
And then again, in March of this year, 2024, the International Space Station released a battery pack. So they released their crap, their trash.
Well, yeah, they expect it to burn up. That's what they do,
yeah. They released a battery pack, and it made its way all the way to Earth. And it was a cylindrical piece of metal. It tore through the roof of Alejandro Otero's Naples, Florida home. It weighed 1.6 pounds, which is significant.
Yeah.
It was 4 inches in height and 1.6 inches in diameter. So that's pretty small. That's 4 inches in height, so it's about the size of a hot dog.
Yeah, it sounds like.
It hit the roof hard enough, and it busted right through it. Just made a hole. The guy's son, his 19-year-old son, was home at the time. He was not. And he said it sounded like fireworks going off. I'm assuming it was like the explosion type of fireworks, not the squealing kind of fireworks. Yeah. So
I'm pretty sure that the ISS was ISS.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to turn this map to you.
Okay.
It shows the path of it.
Of
the ISS.
That's the path of the ISS? What the fuck? It's like you could actually calculate fairly accurate probability of something hitting a city or a city, not necessarily a building, but it's like wherever the path of the orbit crosses a city, if it's an equatorial orbit, it's the same cities every time. If it's not an equatorial orbit, then essentially what part of the ground the orbit is passing over at any given cycle changes because the Earth is rotating.
Right.
So it makes it much harder. Like if you have something in equatorial orbit, it's the same cities every time, and you just look at those cities. You look at what proportion of the total length around the planet they are taking up, and there's your proportion.
Okay, but
it's going to hit the city at that proportion, considering you release the space debris uniformly. It's not like you're thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to aim for the city or something.
Right. So my question would be, if they release it while they're over the ocean, and it is going to presumably follow an orbit itself, the debris is, before its orbit starts decaying. Because it doesn't just like they release it and just fall, boom, boom, splash.
So if you imagine, let's say you're in the ISS, you're on a spacewalk on the ISS, and you drop a bolt, and then you have a tube so you could just sit there for a long time and just watch the bolt. The ISS will eventually make a correction, so it's nudging itself with little thrusters in the direction, pretty much to speed itself up. It's more complicated than that, but because the atmosphere is dragging the bolt and the ISS. So if you're just sitting there, you have the bolt perfectly stationary. Eventually you'll see the bolt appears to pick up some speed in the direction that would be slowing it. You know that because it is. I mean, you're getting slowed, but then you get pushed by the thrusters. So the bolt will gradually start drifting away. At the point where it starts really deorbiting, though, is the point where it's actually like the minimum point in the orbit dips really into the atmosphere, and it's not going to make it out of there, you know?
So in other words, where they release it has no real bearing on where it's going to land.
You could predict probably relatively accurately, which half of the planet will hit, but you can't. I mean, it will orbit a lot. It takes a long time to like in the same orbit the ISS is in. I mean, it's considered space. It's an excellent vacuum. In vacuum chambers, they don't pump the air out to that low of density. It's very, very, very thin atmosphere. You know, orders of magnitude denser atmosphere than like out in interstellar space, you know. It's very, very low drag on anything in that orbit.
So who is responsible for this shit falling out of the sky?
Consider this. Let's say you're in a plane and it's all above board, everything's legal and everything's, fine. And you did your due diligence, your plane is great. But rattling or something in the plane causes a bolt to fall out of the plane.
Well, I know which airlines that was.
Through someone's window and hits somebody. Who's responsible? You know what I mean?
Who is responsible?
I mean, I don't know. It's not like, I'm taking this battery pack and I'm going to steer it at the planet and kill somebody.
Let's take it out of the huge company arena, and let's say you're driving your car and you have just put new tires on, or so you changed a tire or something, and you didn't tighten one of the bolts.
Yeah.
And as you're going down the highway, that bolt comes off and crashes through the windshield and kills somebody.
I should say
you're responsible.
I should say that scenario is vastly more likely than you getting hit by space debris.
Yes, it probably is.
In fact, it's probably like many orders of magnitude.
Well, now I'm going to be freaked out about driving down the highway.
That happens. I mean, relatively frequently. Relatively frequently, meaning like...
Okay, so let's even make it easier. Let's even, like, not even that. Let's say you have your pickup truck and you're on your way to the dump and you've got your trash in the back of your pickup truck, which is totally legal, totally acceptable, and somehow you hit a bump or something, your trash bounces out and hits a pedestrian on the side of the street. You are responsible.
You're responsible.
It's your trash. You maybe didn't intend for that to happen, and there's no law that says you have to, go above and beyond the normal amount of securing your garbage in the back of your pickup truck. Okay, so that is the question that they are trying to decide in court, because that guy Otero, he's hired an attorney because all he wanted was for NASA to pay to repair the hole in its roof. He wasn't trying to sue him for like emotional damage or something. He just wanted, help me fix the hole in my roof. Probably his insurance company said, well, it wasn't an act of God.
Yeah.
There's a responsible party here.
Yeah.
And so they've hired an attorney, and NASA is saying it's not their fault. It's just something that happens. It's one of those things,
it's like, without a rigorous definition, and as far as I know, there is no rigorous definition for really estimating what is a cause of something probabilistically, when there's this whole network of events that are diffusing the cause-effect relationship. It's like the butterfly effect thing, where the butterfly flaps its wings, and then there's this huge network of events. And somewhere down the line, there's a tornado or whatever, hurricane. Could you have the hurricane without the butterfly flapping its wings? I mean, the huge network,
you'll never know,
might require the butterfly flapping
you'll
its
never
wings.
know.
But it also you might get the same thing by a lizard licking its eyeball or whatever. So how about this? Let's say you're walking down the street and a bird which has grabbed a peanut, a natural growing peanut off the ground, flies and then drops the peanut, oops, and it falls and hits your head. Who's responsible?
The bird.
Okay, but no one's legally responsible,
No one's legally
right?
responsible.
Even if somebody, by the way, planted the peanut plant, right?
That's true.
So consider this. We've been talking about space debris.
Yes.
So there's a lot of space debris, right? Ooh, a lot of space debris.
Yes.
Okay, and they're like, maybe on the order of tons. Ooh. Okay, there's like quadrillions upon fucking trillion tons of rock in orbit around the sun. And frequently, huge rocks
Yes.
come near the planet. Frequently, literally every day, there's rocks that hit the atmosphere.
Yes.
So frequently that at night, if you look up at certain times
You can see them.
of the month or whatever, you can see rocks entering the atmosphere. Some of them are big.
Yes.
Some of them are so big that they could completely annihilate all life.
And yet we don't look up with horror at falling stars.
Yeah. So, and it does so happen that meteorites hit people, hit houses, hit fields. It happens, relatively speaking, all the time. Probably a lot more frequently than space junk. I remember seeing something, it was like, I don't know, over 10 years ago, where someone was just sitting on their couch and meteorite went straight through their roof and just killed them.
Yeah.
Which, again, is like a super rare event. If
Thankfully.
you consider fragmentation when it hits the atmosphere, increases the probability a lot. But, and I should say, those rocks, meteorites, are potentially going much faster, which is a good thing, because the faster it goes, the more likely it is to be totally annihilated by the atmosphere.
Right.
Like a rock coming in from deep space or interstellar space could be going, I don't really know, but I want to say tens to hundreds of kilometers per second, which is really, 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 really fast. So fast that unless it's huge, like a comet or bigger, it will just be completely destroyed by the atmosphere.
So on average, between 200 and 400 pieces of debris that are tracked enter Earth's atmosphere each year, and that's about one piece per day that actually enters our atmosphere and makes it to Earth. One piece per day. But the number of space debris events has been increasing steadily since the 1960s, with an exponential increase in recent years, probably because we're putting a lot more stuff up there.
Yeah.
And also some of those satellites are getting older, so there's a turnover of stuff that's up in orbit around the Earth. But the ESA reported...
European Space Agency, I think.
The ESA reported that almost 2,500 pieces of space debris made it to Earth in December of 2023. So that's like crazy lot in that, just in that 1 month. Thankfully, as you pointed out earlier, human populations are rarely affected by things that fall from outer space, including rocks and trash, because it's largely a numbers game. People live on a relatively small percentage of Earth's total surface. Any objects that don't burn up and disintegrate upon re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, or entry, as the case may be, they usually fall into the ocean. About 70% of them, no, that's not right. About 70% of the Earth's surface is ocean.
Yeah. It's interesting. You could probably take the space of a person, how much space they take up, multiply by 8 billion. You get a certain land area. You divide that by the total surface area of the planet, and that would be a rough estimate. It's not exact. That won't be right, because there'll be more debris arriving in certain areas rather than, and there are fewer people at the poles, of course. That actually sounds like, if it's like...
You would come up with some kind of a ballpark number of probability.
Yeah, so if it's like 6 orders of magnitude, if the total human area is 6 orders of magnitude less than the surface area of the planet or whatever. I have no clue what it would be.
I have no clue. And this is all true. There's also property that gets damaged, though. But in a global effort to reduce space debris making it back to Earth, many satellite mission teams are actually able to safely maneuver retired satellites back to the Earth's atmosphere. And then one of two things happen. For satellites that orbit really close to Earth, the operators lower the orbit of, for instance, a decommissioned satellite so that it naturally re-enters the atmosphere within 25 years. That's called the 25-year rule. And so as it begins to fall back towards Earth, it loses altitude. The compression and friction in the dense region of the atmosphere closest to the Earth generates a lot of heat, which makes it burn up. So that's one thing they do. But if it has enough fuel, they can actually fly it back through the atmosphere to crash it into the ocean, which is
so they can direct it
more controllable. So the Pacific Ocean location where they aim for has several different names, one of them being Point Nemo, which is Latin for no one. I didn't know Nemo stood for no one. And the Oceanic Pole of Inaccessibility, which is a place where the nearest landmass is 1,450 nautical miles away.
Farthest distance.
As much as I understand that the chances are slim to none that you or I will ever be hit by space junk, obviously, no matter what the odds, there are many people who have been impacted literally. So screw the odds. Predicting where and when something will re-enter the atmosphere is full of complete uncertainty. There are fluctuations in the density of the upper atmosphere that continually increase or decrease the amount of aerodynamic drag affecting an object in low orbit. That in turn affects the timing and location of contact. So you cannot know. So it's just a bunch of shit that happens. It's floating around, not floating, flying, zooming around up there.
So
there's not much you can do about it. I
really feel like we have to. So, like, imagine this: God, like 13 billion years ago, or whatever, or 2,000 years ago, whatever.
That was Jesus.
It is just like slightly altering the positions of particles and using that to predict what will happen in the future at all points in the future.
Yes, and there are people who believe that.
Yeah, so you can imagine this situation, its fate, and there's no way you could say, like, even if you knew how everything worked, like superdeterminism, you could predict the location of everything and it all checks out. But here's this crazy circumstance that was destined to happen. It's like probability and like circumstance is really, it's a weird form of supernaturalism. Like, if it is supernatural, it can also just be completely not supernatural, you know? Like, for instance, God, the only supernatural thing in the God scenario was 7,000 years ago or whatever, was Genesis, whatever. That was the only paranormal thing anywhere. But there are still things happening that are
residual effects.
The image of that paranormal event. So do you say the odds are paranormally high? You could even estimate the odds. No, it's just a crazy freak thing that happened. But do you say like this was a paranormal thing? I mean, if you knew that it was a god.
Anytime the odds are extremely unlikely that something is going to occur and then it occurs, I think it's human nature to say that there must have been some paranormal...
A cause, like a direct cause.
There has to be some kind of supernatural expression there. And so no matter what the deal is, why this guy in Naples, Florida, his house got crashed into, or the Chinese lady who had her house crashed into, or the farmer who had his farm, pretty big chunk of the honeycomb outer structure of this spacecraft crashed in his field. Whatever those situations are, you have to say, that's interesting. Now, do I believe it's supernatural? If it hit me, I would probably think,
wow,
there is something to that.
So again, it's like, this kind of thing is, even if there was a supernatural component, you also have it's completely not supernatural.
Right.
Also, I should say the issue is exacerbated potentially by quantum mechanical effects, because as far as anybody knows, there's no way to know what the outcome of very tiny very small scale observations are. And so it appears to be random, just randomness at all points. Mm-hmm. So let's say, you're a god and you're manipulating the outcomes of lots and lots of tiny, tiny small scale events to craft large events. Even that, you couldn't, nobody could say, well, we know that this is happening, that this supernatural thing is happening, but it's also completely valid physics. It's like this. There's a set of things that are totally valid for something, like a quantum mechanical experiment, or you have a way to predict everything about the universe. So at some point, you get hit by space debris or whatever, so you use your magic thing to predict what everything was like before that point, and you can see all the results of all the quantum mechanical events or whatever, the initial state of the universe or whatever. And so, because it's random, there are many alternate possibilities of all those things, how they could have gone. And within that completely valid, this is all perfectly valid physics, within the list of possible universes there, outcomes, is the one where you get hit by space debris. And there's, again, it's like our models of physics completely allow this to happen. Because we include randomness in our physical models of the universe, these sort of things are completely valid. Like ultra, super, hyper rare events that are essentially impossible. But no, they're not. It's just a bunch of random things that happen. And so...
good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Our contact information is in the show notes. You can email us, text us, or even call and leave a 3-minute voicemail. And as always, if you have a story you want to tell, send it to us. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and never be so terrified you can't run.
You can't dodge the space debris.
Da-da-da-da.